Gypsy Allen.
Gypsy Allen.
I call him Red. I was stuck on Man of War. I thought I wanted a stallion, and if you've read any of the articles, you know that I was enchanted. Anyway, besides after what I've seen with Morgans, the stallions, typically the stallions and the geldings look a lot more like what I think Morgans should look like than a lot of the mares, even the best mares. Don't look as Morgan-y. When we found out I had the only Morgan horse in the whole county, everybody wanted to breed to him. Everybody was breeding to the Remount Stallion, which was an Arabian, Khyber, I guess his name was. And so I got besieged by these people, and they come in at lunchtime, and they come in with a mare that'll kick the windows out of your barn and everything else at that time. And the mares either were barren or aborted their colts or something. So we didn't have, but I finally said to Bill, I don't want a stallion. At that time, Red was not the type they wanted. At this time, I think he would have been super. I met the Buffalo crowd of Morgan enthusiasts. Absolutely delightful people, just like I had grown up with, riding horses in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. Just people. They loved horses. And so maybe they weren't wing commanders trainers, or they weren't wealthy or anything else like that, but you have a common interest, and we just got immersed in each other. And I remember Fritz Eisenhower, because I was showing Red, trying to show him in one class, and I had a little trouble with the canter, I guess, and Fritz said afterwards, "You're messing your horse up on the canter." He says, "You're going to ruin his canter." And I said, "Well, what am I doing?" And he says, "You're digging him accidentally with those spurs every time you move." I took the spurs off. I have never used spurs since. And then I met the Rogers and Pete Hess and all that crew and everything else like that. So what had happened was that after I got Nancy and started, I had Polly and I had the pony, so we had colts, and we had filled all the entries at the Morgan show at the county fair, and that's when I never pushed Morgans, because I always said to everybody, I don't care whether you buy Morgans or not, but if you don't, I'm going to beat you in every kind of class you can come up with. I started going to a lot of shows because Sally's off at camp, and Bill's off at National Guard camp, and I go to the Chemung County Fair, and then I load everything up and go to Hamburg. Oh, we had fun. We had fun. And that's where we really got everybody together, and we caravan to where we were going to sleep. If we weren't going to sleep in the barn or our cars or our trailers, it wasn't even fashionable. But Ed Rody and I used to line up our trailers with the back part right up against the barn walls, and then we'd sleep in mine, because mine was a 3-horse trailer, so you can put 2 cots in the stalls, and mine went right across the top of the manger, because Charlie brought me a monstrosity of a trailer at the Erie County Fair. I mean, we loved the Erie County Fair. We lived at the Erie County Fair. We had a 3-ring circus going on. There were elephants. There was a baseball game. There were trotters going off in front of the grandstand. There was everything going on, and we're showing Morgan horses. And at that time, the only person that even knew anything about Morgans who was showing there was Gene Harry. First time I saw Lippet Mandate, he's coming along the rail, snorting, "I am a stallion, but I am going to be very good because I am not ever going to embarrass Maryland," and he's piling right along, and I fell in love with him. I fell in love with him. So then she says, you've got to go to the National Morgan Horse Show. And I don't know a soul, so I have a friend, and she decided we're going to go, and at the last minute, she couldn't go. Well, I finally thought, well, the driving didn't scare me or anything else like that, but when I got to Bennington or Brattleboro, Vermont, I heard the Warsaw Concerto, and it was the loneliest I had ever been in my life, and I was going to turn around and come back. So I arrived at Windsor about 9 o'clock at night, and I locate Lippet Mandate and the little boy she has looking after him. But before I get out of there and find a place to bunk up and everything, in the next 2 days, I became, fortunately, friends of Ayelien, Ted Davis, and Fergie, and just all these Ruth Town, Ruth Orchid, Lyman Orchid, the whole bunch of them, and they just sort of accepted me even though I was from New York, you know. And that was the year that first time I saw the Justin Morgan class, I thought, now this is what I want. I want a mare that can win that class.
Now, a Justin Morgan class, in order to win a Justin Morgan class, you had to...
You trial a half-mile race in harness. You run a quarter-of-a-mile race. You show as a park horse, and then you pull a stone boat with a minimum of 500 pounds. And as the years went by, and I was preparing Peggy for it, I realized that never, no matter how many horses could or couldn't pull a stone boat, never had I ever seen a Justin Morgan performance horse that could walk, trot, and canter like a show horse after 2 races. When I bought Nancy Ann, and I had already fallen in love with Lippet Mandate, which started the whole blasted thing anyway, because when I saw Lippet Mandate, I thought, this is what I want. And from that day on, I actually compared every Morgan I ever saw with my appreciation of what I liked in that particular horse. And so therefore I became friends. The Morgan trainers that were saddlebred were few and far between, because they didn't really realize if you got into certain bloodlines, they were very trainable. I mean, any kid or any moron like me could train a Morgan horse if I got the right one, but a lot of the trainers didn't realize how trainable they were at first. But as soon as they got into the bloodlines, which were Morgan, but had been lost in the saddlebred registry before Colonel Battelle got all the Morgans registered, as soon as they started pulling in those lines and people went down that line, those are very trainable horses. Any trainer loves that.
I purchased him as a 3-year-old, and he was not recommended to me. Joe Bulruss, who was the horseman for Mr. Knight, said that this horse had caused him more problems than any that he had ever had. So he did not recommend him for me. However, there was an old horseman with me, and he thought it was okay for me to get him. Well, I took his name, Mandate, as an order to show that the Morgan can do just about anything. And over the course of the years, Lippet Mandate was hunted with the Beaufort Hunt. He was shown at the Pennsylvania National as a stock horse. He's been shown as a parade horse, but of course, basically, he was just shown in regular walk, trot, canter events. He was never defeated with whatever mare he paired with, including Ruthven's Nancy Ann. And in pair classes, we used to have a lot of those competitions. And let's see, the biggest disappointment was that he never won the race at Northampton. He was in the lead and should have done it, but as people were clapping and so forth, he got excited and jumped into a canter as he went under the line. So that ended that. However, some of his sons and daughters have won the races and also the Justin Morgan performance class. which Aileen's mandates Peggy Lou is one of. All of our campers here, when I ran the riding camp, they all rode Lippitt Mandate. I guess the day that we laid him away, he hadn't been used very much, you know, in his 29th and 30th years. And when I went to his stall with his saddle and bridle, he was just so excited and just dancing up and down in place to think that, you know, he was going to be ridden and had something done with him. And so anyway, I saddled and bridled him and rode him down the hill to where he was to be laid away. He always was very excited about getting on the van and going to the shows.
I took one look at Nancy Ann, and that little head and neck captivated me just like it did the judge when I took all the silver off of her. And then I said, I've got to have her. She said, you can't afford her. I said, maybe I can't, but my mother can. So we made a deal on Nancy Ann in which she got the first foal which she was carrying, and she would keep her till the national show up there in Vermont, and I would come up there with my parade outfit and put my parade outfit on Nancy Ann after all of her equitation riders had gone around and had a great time, and she'd shown her and done pretty well with her, because she was a very natural, up-headed, nice little mare with absolutely no mouth. Oh yeah, the first time I rode Nancy was so funny because that was one of the few shows my dear departed husband went, and he knew my mother paid $1,000 for this horse. And after Marilyn's kids and Marilyn rides and wins all these ribbons, and we put my parade outfit on Nancy, it goes slamming into the ring in the parade gate, and she goes across the center of the ring. So I come around again, and when I get to the judges again, I know that's what she's going to do. I said, we ain't doing it. She says, we're either doing it or ain't doing anything. So we spent the rest of that class on my brand new horse standing and watching everything go. And of course, Bill's $1,000 for a horse and it won't even move. So Marilyn didn't mind, I didn't mind, and it was the first time I attracted everybody's attention because there we were all gussied up in all this silver and not moving.
Your Peggy was the result of your Lippitt Mandate crossed with Ruthven's
Nancy Ann.
And Peggy is mandates Peggy Lou.
Yes. What happened was that when Anna said, you're going to sell this one, I realized that not everybody could see in Peggy what I saw. I loved Peggy. Peggy had the same natural ability and the unspoiled, untampered with temperament that she could learn to do it just as well, but I didn't know how to do it. So I didn't want to do it, and I did what Marilyn and Harold told me to do. I got the bitty rig on her, and I got the ground driving on her, and I had my friend Winnie Sport hitch her to a cart and everything else like that. And when she's 3 years old, I take a look at her and I thought, how am I going to get her to go like Nancy was going? And I couldn't afford a trainer. And then Mother says, but I can afford a trainer. So Marilyn says, well, now we got to find you a trainer. So we're looking all around, and nobody that she would recommend was wanting to take a little country mare from out in New York State, and found out that Elizabeth Power, who's one of the finest ladies I ever knew in my whole life, she said, Johnny Lydon is now training for Mrs. Power, who's a new breeder, and she doesn't have a 3-year-old, and they will take your little mare. A friend of mine, my friend that rode Peggy in the pair class at Harrisburg, her boss took Peggy up to Johnny Lydon's in his truck, his old truck, which broke down on the way back. But he drives in there, and they take Peggy off of the truck, and everybody takes one look at it, what kind of a little farm pony have they sent us here? But Mrs. Power, bless her, Elizabeth loved red sorrels, and I loved liver chestnuts. She had all the liver chestnuts, and I had the red sorrels. So they start to work Peggy, and of course she's already broken to drive like any kind of backyard horse. So when she's about 6 weeks along the line, Johnny is so enthusiastic. He says, your mare is going to learn to use her legs. And I go, well, whatever this means, you know. So I said, Mrs. Power invited me to come up and ride her and all that sort of stuff. And I said, no, we were Mrs. Power's guests. And then we went over to Johnny Lydon's to see Peggy. And they brought my little farm pony out. And she's got her neck straight up in the air and her tail animated. And she's going like a hackney. And her eyes are this big, and every time she sees Johnny Lydon, they get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then Jenny Lydon is flying up there and saying, I love to ride her. She's the most fun of anything I've ever ridden. And I'm thinking, so Polly, what in the heck is this my horse? So she stayed there till she was perfect. And they took her to the National Morgan Horse Show, and then we brought her home. And I made a roadster out of her because I didn't know all this stuff that Johnny Lydon knew. I don't know what to do. So he says to me, well, what do you've been riding a parade horse? What do you do with the parade horse? I said, well, you know, I've got a bit in with a thing like that in her mouth and a roller in it and everything else like that. And I just gig her up a little with my legs, get her behind the bit, and then turn her loose. And she did it. He said, that's all you really do with a full bride. Yeah, you got 2 reins, 2 bits, and all this stuff. But I did find out a lifetime thing then. Anything that I ever fooled much with, I have purposely taught them to get behind the curb bit, because if you didn't use a snaffle, you couldn't touch the curb without them going down. Then that prevented rearing, and they also could defend themselves against. Did my painting of Peggy, and she knew Peggy because we had come along together, and everybody said it's the most likeness of a Morgan she had ever done in her life, because naturally doing as many, she got a little more stylized. But my picture of Peggy looks exactly like Peggy. She knew what she looked like, and I gave her pictures with the normal action and headset and everything. And I said, she's 14 hands high and 17 hands long, and she's got a neck like a stallion, but a face like a pony, you know. But I said, and very, very fine legs. Well, it starts with brown pepper, but after I hooked brown pepper up with Bob Brooks, his future was made. And Bob was a trainer, and he loved brown pepper. He loved Don Quixote pepper. He loved all the peppers. He loved Bandera pepper, who couldn't get out of his own way, but looked like he could because he'd had Bob's nice touch in the beginning.
Now, the Peppers were all the roadies' horses.
Wallace had a little drugstore or something, and Evelyn was a teacher. And they had a little tiny little place like lots of people had, like everybody had, a little run-in that never had any grass because there wasn't enough grass to support it. One horse, and they'd have 3 or 4 on it and stuff like that. And whatever the local help they could get with the chores and things like that. But of course, since we were using our Morgans, showing wasn't the first thing. We got sucked into the showing, let's face it. We were trail riders. So I met Brown Pepper the first time I ever saw him. I think he was at Losey's, Hector's grazing land, which later became the only state park in New York. And he was 3 years old then, and he was about half trained, and not exactly what you want to ride on a trail ride. And where I could turn my mares and geldings out and thing, they had to have a special place for him because he was a stallion and everything else. But he was beautiful. And Wally says, I got a couple more back home. Oh, and then maybe Don Quixote came either to that ride or one afterward, but when Don Quixote was 3, Ed was riding him. And he's a very sweet little thing, and he is a gelding. I kind of fell in love with the little horse, and I had promised a couple horses to some of these shows for Maryland, and I was going to take Glad Sam along, who was never supposed to be in the show ring in his whole life. Wallace is complaining about all the little rats he's getting down to these little ratty little mares and this ratty little stallion, and I'm taking one look at this little thing and saying, oh, like a whole barn full of this stuff. So he said, well, I said, I'd rather take Don Quixote to the Allentown show than what I am taking along with Nancy, because I'm showing Nancy. And he said, take Don Quixote, I'll pay for the whole thing. So I took him, and of course, he blew into the Mid-Atlantic Circuit, and then by that time everybody knew what Pepper was. But Don Quixote was like riding a puppy. He just plowed along with almost putting his feet in his reins, you know, there he was. So when I came back with all the trophies and everything, Wallace is ecstatic. He says, take him every place you're going this summer and I'll pay for it and everything else like that. I said, look, that was a long trip. He popped a splint. He's only 3 years old. I don't want to be responsible for a colt with what he's got and use him up in his 3rd year, because I used Red up in his 3rd year. He didn't have a clean leg by the time he was a gelding. So I said, I'm not doing that to another horse. And I said, take him home and grow him a while. And then they latched into a really nice gentleman of a trainer that helped her. And of course then Don Quixote went off. And I mean, he beat everybody. And they were one of the most likable people in our area. They weren't actually from Buffalo, but they were there. Wallace was very instrumental in getting the classes for Morgan's Estate Fair. In the Rogers and Hess and Eisenhart and that bunch that got them into Erie County and Buffalo. Well, when the Bachmans got involved, they got us in the Buffalo International. You know, so these people, even though they were an unlikely group to say they were all close friends, they could pool what they had, and they did the Morgan horse great in New York.
Mary Arnold was part of that.
And Mary Arnold, yes. Oh, Mary Arnold was absolutely great. And she was, of course, she was the first person that I met. So after I took Don Quixote back, I said to Mother, we need one of these Pepper things. So I said to Wallace, I need one of your fillies. Can I lease one of your fillies? And he says, sure. So he says, take that one. Her own mother doesn't want her, and we haven't been able to catch her and put a halter on her. That's little Miss Pepper. She's standing saying, nobody loves me at all. So we finally corralled her and got her haltered and got her home and everything else like that. And she just never seemed to grow. You didn't even know she was there. She was no trouble. The other mares all thought they were going to kill her, but she said, I'll get out of their way. That Ruthven mare is going to kill me. And Polly was surely going to kill her. So she just fit in the background. But she never bellied up like a lot of Morgans do. And I said, I don't think her conformation is good enough to show maybe a better breeder. So so with Little Miss Pepper, Wallace draws me up about a 10-page blue book with all the whereases and everything, and the last page he says, if I want to buy her outright, I can pay $200 for her. I said, I don't have $200. Well, this is, I have $200, because my lawyer says, why lease her when you can buy her for $200? So Mother buys herself another Morgan horse. So after she had the foal, she began to look a little better, and Les Marilyn came and looked at her, and she says, well, she didn't look like much out there with all my nice colts. And she said, let's see how she moves. So she throws her tail up in the air and does that happy motion in front. And I thought, oh my God. So I thought, well, I'm never going to get her in the full bridle. Somebody's going to have a big fight with this little girl. She's not going to go into it like Don Quixote Pepper did, not by any stretch of the imagination. So I called up Johnny Lyde and said, would you like to take this mare for just a couple months and take her to Harrisburg. I said, I've been trail riding her since she was 3 years old. She's raised the 2 colts, and you can put her shoes on, and you can do this, and you can do that, and you can ride her, you can get 3 gates. So he took her, and of course, she didn't quite have the respect for Johnny Lydon that Peggy had. Peggy opened her eyes and watched every move he made, and Pepper just said, well, so who's Johnny Lydon? So when they get to Harrisburg, I think he's going to ride Peggy, and I'm going to climb back on little Miss Pepper, and she's now going to do what she's supposed to do in 2 bits, like a lady, like little Peggy did. So he says to me, Ayelien, she's different since she was. I think you'd be better off on Peggy. You ride your little mare, and I'll take your little mare in here the first time. I says, I've shown her in a snaffle bit. I showed her at Scranton in a snaffle bit, and she walked trotting canter. He said, she's different than she is. So I said, all right, but I said, I wanted you to ride Peggy because I wanted Peggy to win more. So, because I knew what little Miss Pepper was going to do if she ever did it right. Because everybody just fell in love with her. She's so sweet. And so Polly's up in the stand, and everybody's cheering and watching, and Johnny Lydon comes flying through the end gate on little Miss Pepper, and little Miss Pepper was a little for, she's even smaller than Thurlstein Tip was for him, and Johnny is a picture rider. So she comes flying in with her little bronc ears up, her eyes popped out, and says, now I'm going to put on a show. She was never in the bridle once in the whole time. She never was where we were. And nobody could take their eyes off of her. Here's this little thing Johnny Lydon is riding, and it's doing a trot that would just knock your socks off. So, but not on command. So, of course, she didn't get a ribbon. She didn't get excused or anything, and Peggy did get one of the ribbons. So afterwards, everybody's raving and ranting about little Miss Pepper, and I was going to take her home, and Johnny says, let me take her back and finish her, and then you can ride her. I says, you were never going to change her. I said, that's what she had right in the beginning. That's why you got her because I said I wasn't going to have the disagreement with her. And I got along with her as long as I rode her in a hackamore or a snaffle bit and let her do it. But I said, once you started telling little Miss Pepper how to, she wasn't afraid of anybody. She wasn't even afraid of Townsend John the first time we brought him in to breed her, and she'd never seen him in his life. And when Danny got Townsend John off the trailer, she turned around and charged him because she says, I want to see who it is first. So anyway, I took her home and started the long thing of trying to get her back so I wouldn't spoil what he had been able to develop, and I could use it in the best way I could. So I took her to the racetrack, where I always did all right. And we hitched her to her cart because Garrett had finally convinced her that she had to pull a cart whether she wanted to or not. So at the racetrack, she wouldn't let any of the racehorse drivers in the cart. She would pull me, but nobody else. And she would pull me and nobody else in with me. And what she finally did was, I would pony a racehorse that didn't want to go 4 miles with her in the cart before I rode her. So, and she could probably trot every bit as fast as Peggy and Panez and Upper Van Don and all the rest of the Morgans except for Harry Andrews, Midwest horses. So then after I'd go 4 miles with her in the cart, then I'd put the saddle on her and pony some more racehorses from the saddle. So I said, after being embarrassed in the ladies' class at Northampton with her deciding not to go about halfway through a ladies' class of about 50 horses, I decided she can be a roadster. That she can do. So she was a whale of a roadster. Absolutely a whale of a roadster. But there was too much good there, and I didn't want to raise any more colts out of her and sell them to somebody else, because I had Pepperman, used by Brown Pepper, and I thought I'm going to be able to keep him, so I don't need her, I don't want to raise any more colts. So I tried to sell her, and Helen Greenwald says, not everybody wants a mare as high life as she is. So I finally find somebody that wants a mare as high life as she is, and he buys her, and he lasts about a year with her before he discovers that this mare has got other ideas. So she passed around a few times, and she did spend a good time at Helen Young's, and Helen Young was able to pleasure ride her a little bit, but their trainer, whoever he was, who made the mistake of thinking maybe he could do what other people couldn't, he gave up on training. So she finally became a bona fide brood mare. And I think about that time when Bob started collecting all the pepper stuff. So
Bob is Bob Brooks.
Bob Brooks got her. And he got sweet pepper at the dispersal at Mrs. Powers. So Bob ends up with her, and Nira and Margie and, oh God, all the rest of the little peppers he could find.
Tell me about Pecos.
Okay. Before we even thought, I guess the Buffalo people thought of a club because they discussed it, but nobody did much about it. In the meantime, we're getting together for the fair and various little things. It was social. And we liked each other, and we had fun. So we went to, either we were going to go to Pete Hess's. Yeah, we used to just go to each other's farms and drool over their horses, no matter what they were doing or what they were stabled in or how much they knew. We just had a heck of a good time. So Pete said, will you ride Pecos for me? And of course, by this time, I've seen some of the Buffalo, New York stallions that I thought, oh, I don't think I want to get back on a stallion right away. I got all over riding the stallion. He said, no. He called him fella. He said, no, he's John. And I go, oh, sure. I said, well, all right. How do you ride him? He said, well, English. I said, I'll ride him if you let me ride him in my Western saddle. So I got on him and rode him, and of course, you know, he's a sweet little pumpkin with a temperament like Nocturne and some of those, and Mandy. And I loved him. And he had a head that would make you cry. So I said, I will breed my two mares to you, and I have a very nice Palomino saddle mare that we will breed to him. So I took my friend, he's one of the friends I had riding Peggy when I have to ride Pepper in a local pair class. So I took him up there and met the Rogers and everything, and then we went over to see Pecos, and I tried to prepare him. I says, you have never seen a head like this horse has. And when he looked at us, I mean, my friend who was a man, tears went down his face. Pecos took your breath away. He had the prettiest, I mean, I thought Mandy had a pretty head. And this little guy, and the same sweet stuff was there that Mandy had. And he was the same size. He was a goofy color, and he got a whole lot of strange colored colts before strange colors were an asset. But he was a sweetheart and gentle as a kitten. Woody was beautiful. He was almost black, seal brown. And so when he's 3 years old, and I'm going to the National Morgan Horse Show, now who the heck did I take with him? Maybe Denise, the time we got the brown, we had been in the championship class. But I had a boy, well, I had bought GT, and he was my boy that went with me. And Pete says, if you're going to the National, will you take Woody with you? And I said, well, you'll have to bring him to my place. So they brought him, and he's 3 years old, and he's rank.
Now, Woody's registered.
Ledgewood Select.
Got it.
Okay, so they brought him to my place, and then he was noisy and he was steady, but you could handle him the way these people did. And then along with him came a girl that was a friend of the family or a relative who was going to show him in the halter class. And she has a little dog collar chain that she's going to put on this bull of the stallion. And but he loaded, and we took care of him and everything, except that the boy that was feeding him in the morning, his stall was between Woody's and Denise's stall at the National Morgan Horse Show, and at 7 o'clock in the morning, Woody stands up at the top and says, time for my breakfast, you know, and Johnny thought he was coming in with him. So then we get ready to go to the show ring with him, and the girl got cold feet because he didn't have enough schooling and discipline, and he was very steady because Pete's son had accidentally run Woody in the same place where Pecos was, and he almost killed Pecos, so he was like a tomcat. He was going to kill all the other stallions in the ring and everything else like that. So this girl, whoever she was, she chickened out, and I said to Frida, we're going to have to show Pete's horse, and he's going to kill us. So I said, okay, we put a good chain on him and in his mouth or wherever we put it, and we, said, hey, here we are, and she had the whip, and the first time I said, don't touch him with a whip, because I said, he's going to fight back. I said, tantalize him, and, we'll get by. Well, we want a ribbon there. Ben Don, I felt, had more influence on the Morgans of my day, good influence, and I liked him. The only thing was that he didn't know what to breed his daughters to, because the rest of us knew. We bred the daughters all right. So, but so he did try other stallions. But Ben Don himself was another one of those exceptionally beautiful, perfectly formed, naturally endowed, tempered like a puppy, and what he could do is when he was through showing as a park horse, he had years left as a road horse, and he was gentle. I mean, he really was. And Selective Windcrest resembled him a good deal, except he had that Cornwallis cross, which gives you what looks like might be uncontrollable, but was really one of the things that would attract you to those Cornwallis horses. And they looked like they could take you through the wall, through a cinder block wall, but they were controllable and beautiful. And Woody had that, which was, he was a different kind of a horse entirely, although he looked just like, a lot like, and of course Pecos's head, even diluted, was superior. Ted had renamed him mainly because he didn't want to stand another stallion that didn't have the Windcrest name, so he just renamed him Selective Windcrest. Alan Major had been, local, some of the local shows and siring lots of good stuff, and he was bred in the purple of the Cornwallis stuff, and the thing is, those two boys, somehow or other, I kept saying that you really should be showing out against some of these horses, so that somehow or other those two brothers got the courage to come to Harrisburg, and of course, after the first time they went in the ring, and Ayelien and everybody else, and of course, they all knew that Anna started eventually. She had Cornwallis in the beginning. And so they're drooling over the rail at this thing. And these kids, these boys, they're dressed like Pasofino riders half the time. And Pasofino riders ride in business suits and things like that. I think this is the way I remember it. But what they came out there, and Alan Major, a great big snorty horse that looks like he's performing on cocaine or something, and he's not. He is out there scaring the devil out of everybody else and doing it perfectly, and the most beautiful big black horse you ever saw in your life. And here are these two country boys that bring this horse in, and they never showed him again that I know of. They got tied in every class, including the championship.